Chapter 12 of The American Housewife. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nick Number. The American Housewife by Anonymous. Chapter 12. 195. Plain Cream Cake. Dissolve a teaspoonful of saleratus in a wineglass of milk, strain it onto a little sifted flour, beat 3 eggs with a teacup of rolled sugar, mix them with the above ingredients, together with half a grated nutmeg. Add a teacup of thick cream and sifted flour to render it of the consistency of unbaked pound cake. Bake it as soon as the cream and flour are well mixed in, as stirring the cream much decomposes it. 196. Rich Cream Cake. Stir together till very white half a pound of butter, 3/4 of a pound of sugar. Beat the whites and yelks of 7 eggs separately to a froth, stir them into the cake. Put in a wineglass of brandy, a grated nutmeg, and 1.5 pounds of sifted flour. Just before it is baked, add half a pint of thick cream and 1 pound of seeded raisins. 197. Cymbals. Half a pound of sugar, 1/4 pound of butter, a couple of eggs, half a nutmeg, a teaspoonful of saleratus, half a teacup of milk. Stir the butter and sugar together, then add the eggs and a little flour, stir in the milk and saleratus, which should be previously strained, then add enough flour to make it stiff enough to roll out. Roll it out 1/2 inch thick, in pounded white sugar, cut it with a tumbler into cakes, and bake them on flat buttered tins. 198. Rich Loaf Cake. Stir gradually into a pint of lukewarm milk 1 pound of sifted wheat flour, add a small teacup of yeast, and set it where it will rise quick. When of a spongy lightness, weigh out 1 pound of butter, 1.25 pounds of nice sugar. Stir them to a cream, then work them with the hand into the sponge. Beat 4 eggs to a froth, the whites and yelks separately. Mix the eggs with the cake, together with a wineglass of wine, 1 of brandy, 1/4 ounce of mace, or 1 nutmeg. Cinnamon is good spice for loaf cake, but it turns it a dark color. Add another pound of flour and work it with the hand for 15 or 20 minutes. The longer it is worked, the more delicate will be the cake. Let it remain till risen again. When perfectly light, beat it a few minutes with the hand, then add a couple of pounds of seeded raisins, 1/4 pound of citron, or almonds blanched and pounded fine. Butter 3 common-sized cake pans and put the cake into them. Let them remain half an hour in a warm place before setting them in the oven. Bake the cake in a quick but not a furious oven, from 1 hour and 15 to 30 minutes according to the heat of the oven. If it browns too fast, cover it while baking with thick paper. 199. Plain Loaf Cake. Mix together a pint of lukewarm milk, 2 quarts of sifted flour, a small teacup of yeast. Set the batter where it will rise quick. When perfectly light, work in with the hand 4 beaten eggs, a teaspoonful of salt, 2 of cinnamon, a wineglass of brandy or wine. Stir 1 pound of sugar with 3/4 pound of butter. When white, work it into the cake, add another quart of sifted flour, and beat the whole well with the hand 10 or 15 minutes, then set it where it will rise again. When of a spongy lightness, put it into buttered cake pans and let them stand 15 or 20 minutes before baking. Add, if you like, 1.5 pounds of raisins just before putting the cake into the pans. 200. Shella, or quick loaf cake. Melt 1/2 pound of butter. When cool, work it into 1.5 pounds of raised dough. Beat 4 eggs with 3/4 pound of rolled sugar, mix it with the dough, together with a wineglass of wine or brandy, a teaspoonful of cinnamon, and a grated nutmeg. Dissolve a teaspoonful of saleratus in a small teacup of milk, strain it onto the dough, work the whole well together for 1/4 hour, then add 1 pound of seeded raisins and put it into cake pans. Let them remain 20 minutes before setting them in the oven. 201. Rice Cake. Mix 10 ounces of ground rice, 3 of wheat flour, 8 ounces of powdered white sugar. Sift the whole by degrees into the beaten yelks of 8 eggs. Add the whites of the eggs, beaten to a stiff froth, and half a grated nutmeg. Bake the cake in deep pans as soon as the ingredients are well mixed in. The cake will bake sufficiently in the course of 20 minutes if the oven is hot. 202. Diet Bread. Sift 1 pound of flour, mix it with 1 pound of rolled sugar. Beat 8 eggs to a froth and stir the flour and sugar in very gradually. Season it to the taste with essence of lemon or rose water. Bake it from 15 to 20 minutes. 203. Lemon cake. Stir together till very white a pound of sugar, half a pound of butter. Then add 8 eggs beaten to a froth, the whites and yelks should be beaten separately, the grated rind of 2 lemons, and the juice of half a lemon. Stir in gradually a pound of sifted flour. Line a couple of cake pans with white buttered paper, turn the cake into them, and bake it in a quick oven. 204. Scotch cake. Stir to a cream a pound of sugar and 3/4 of a pound of butter. Put in the juice and grated rind of a lemon, a wineglass of brandy. Separate the whites and yelks of 9 eggs, beat them to a froth, and stir them into the cake. Then add a pound of sifted flour, and just before it is put in the cake pans, a pound of seeded raisins. 205. Pound cake. Mix a pound of sugar with 3/4 of a pound of butter. When worked white, stir in the yelks of 8 eggs beaten to a froth, then the whites. Add a pound of sifted flour and mace or nutmeg to the taste. If you wish to have your cake particularly nice, stir in, just before you put it into the pans, 1/4 of a pound of citron, or almonds blanched and powdered fine in rose water. 206. Confectioner's Pound Cake. Stir together a pound and 1/4 of sugar, 3/4 of a pound of butter. When of a light color, stir in 12 beaten eggs, a pound and a half of sifted flour, and mace or nutmeg to the taste. 207. Queen's Cake. Rub together till very white a pound of sugar, 3/4 of a pound of butter. Mix a wineglass of wine, 1 of brandy, 1 of milk, and if you wish to have the cake look dark, put in a teaspoonful of saleratus. Stir them into the butter and sugar, together with a pound of flour, a teaspoonful of rose water or essence of lemon, 1/4 of an ounce of mace. Beat the whites and yelks separately of 6 eggs. If no saleratus is used, 2 more eggs will be necessary. When beaten to a froth, mix them with the cake. Stir the whole well together, then add, just before baking it, half a pound of seeded raisins, the same weight of Zante currants, 1/4 of a pound of citron, or almonds, blanched and pounded fine in rose water. The fruit should be stirred in gradually, a handful of each alternately. Line a couple of 3-pint tin pans with buttered white paper, put in the cake, and bake it directly. If it browns too fast, cover it with paper. It takes from an hour and 1/4 to an hour and a half to bake it, according to the heat of the oven. 208. Delicate Cake. Stir to a cream a pound of powdered white sugar, 7 ounces of butter. Then add the whites of 16 eggs, beaten to a stiff froth, half a nutmeg, or a teaspoonful of rose water. Stir in gradually a pound of sifted flour, and bake the cake immediately. The yelks of the eggs can be used for custards. 209. Jelly Cake. Rub together, till white, half a pound of sugar, 6 ounces of butter. Beat 8 eggs to a froth, and stir into the butter and sugar, together with a pound of sifted flour. Add the juice and grated rind of a fresh lemon, and turn this mixture onto scalloped tin plates that have been well buttered. The cake should not be more than 1/4 of an inch thick on each of the plates. Bake them directly, in a quick oven, till a light brown. Pile them on a plate with a layer of jelly or marmalade between each of the cakes, and a layer on the top. 210. Strawberry Cake. Mix a quart of flour with a teaspoonful of salt, 4 beaten eggs, and a teacup of thick cream or melted butter. Add sufficient milk to enable you to roll it out. Roll it out thin, line a shallow cake pan with part of it, then put in a thick layer of nice ripe strawberries, strew on sufficient white sugar to sweeten the strawberries, cover them with a thin layer of the crust, then add another layer of strawberries and sugar. Cover the whole with another layer of crust, and bake it in a quick oven about 25 minutes. 211. Superior Sponge Cake. Take the weight of 10 eggs in powdered loaf sugar, beat it to a froth with the yelks of 12 eggs, put in the grated rind of a fresh lemon, leaving out the white part, add half the juice. Beat the whites of 12 eggs to a stiff froth, and mix them with the sugar and butter. Stir the whole without any cessation for 15 minutes, then stir in gradually the weight of 6 eggs in sifted flour. As soon as the flour is well mixed in, turn the cake into pans lined with buttered paper. Bake it immediately in a quick but not a furiously hot oven. It will bake in the course of 20 minutes. If it bakes too fast, cover it with thick paper. 212. Good Sponge Cake. Beat together the yelks of 10 eggs with a pound of powdered white sugar. Beat to a stiff froth the whites of the eggs and stir them into the yelks and sugar. Beat the whole 10 or 15 minutes, then stir in gradually 3/4 of a pound of sifted flour. Flavor it with a nutmeg or the grated rind of a lemon. Bake it as soon as the flour and spices are well mixed in. 213. Almond Cake. Beat the yelks of 12 eggs to a froth with a pound of powdered white sugar. Beat the whites of 9 eggs to a stiff froth and stir them into the yelks and sugar. When the whole has been stirred together for 10 minutes, add gradually a pound of sifted flour and half a pound of almonds, blanched and pounded fine, then stir in 3 tablespoonsful of thick cream. As soon as the ingredients are well mixed in, turn the cake into buttered pans and bake it immediately. Frost the cake with the reserved whites of the eggs as soon as it is baked. 214. Fruit Cake. 1 pound of flour, 1 of sugar, 3/4 of a pound of butter, 2 pounds of seeded raisins, 2 of currants, 1 of citron, 1/4 of a pound of almonds, half an ounce of mace, a teaspoonful of rose water, a wine glass of brandy, 1 of wine, and 10 eggs. Stir the sugar and butter to a cream, then add the whites and yelks of the eggs, beaten separately to a froth. Stir in the flour gradually, then the wine, brandy, and spice. Add the fruit just before it is put into the pans. It takes over 2 hours to bake it if the loaves are thick. If the loaves are thin, it will bake in less time. This kind of cake is the best after it has been made 3 or 4 weeks, and it will keep good 5 or 6 months. 215. Black Cake. 1 pound of flour, 1 of sugar, 14 ounces of butter, 10 eggs, 3 pounds of seeded raisins, 3 pounds of Zante currants, and 1 pound of citron, a wine glass of wine, 1 of brandy, and 1 of milk, a teaspoonful of saleratus, a tablespoonful of molasses, a tablespoonful of cinnamon, a teaspoonful of cloves, 1/4 of an ounce of mace, or 1 nutmeg. The sugar should be the brown kind, and stirred a few minutes with the butter, then the eggs beaten to a froth, and stirred in. Brown the flour in a pan over a few coals. Stir it constantly to prevent its burning. It should be done before you commence making the cake, so as to have it get cold. Stir it into the butter and sugar gradually, then add the molasses and spice. Dissolve the saleratus in the milk, then strain it, and mix it with the brandy and wine to curdle them. Stir the whole into the cake. Just before you put it into the cake pans, stir in the fruit gradually, a handful of each alternately. When well mixed in, put it into cake pans and bake it immediately. If baked in thick loaves, it takes from 2 hours and a half to 3 hours to bake it sufficiently. The oven should not be of a furious heat. Black cake cuts the best when 3 or 4 weeks old. 216. Macaroons. Soak half a pound of sweet almonds in boiling hot water till the skins will rub off easily. Wipe them dry. When you have rubbed off the skins, pound them fine with rose water. Beat the whites of 3 eggs to a stiff froth, then stir in gradually half a pound of powdered white sugar, then add the almonds. When the almonds are well mixed in, drop the mixture in small parcels on buttered baking plates several inches apart, sift sugar over them, and bake them in a slow oven. 217. Coconut Cakes. Take equal weights of grated coconut and powdered white sugar, the brown part of the coconut should be cut off before grating it. Add the whites of eggs beaten to a stiff froth in the proportion of half a dozen to a pound each of coconut and sugar. There should be just eggs enough to wet up the whole stiff. Drop the mixture onto buttered plates in parcels of the size of a cent, several inches apart. Bake them immediately in a moderately warm oven. 218. Tory Wafers. Melt a teacup of butter, half a one of lard, and mix them with a quart of flour, a couple of beaten eggs, a teaspoonful of salt, a wine glass of wine. Add milk till of the right consistency to roll out. Roll it out about the 1/3 of an inch in thickness, cut it into cakes with a wine glass, lay them on buttered baking plates, and bake them a few minutes. Frost them as soon as baked, and sprinkle comfits or sugar sand on the top. 219. Sugar Drops. Stir to a cream 3 ounces of butter, 6 of powdered white sugar. Then add 3 beaten eggs, half a pound of sifted flour, half of a nutmeg. Drop this mixture by the large spoonful onto buttered plates several inches apart, sprinkle small sugar plums on the top, and bake them directly. 220. Savoy Cakes. Beat 8 eggs to a froth, the whites and yelks should be beaten separately, then mixed together, and a pound of powdered white sugar stirred in gradually. Beat the whole well together for 8 or 10 minutes, then add the grated rind of a fresh lemon and half the juice, a pound of sifted flour, a couple of tablespoonsful of coriander seed. Drop this mixture by the large spoonful onto buttered baking plates several inches apart, sift white sugar over them, and bake them immediately in a quick but not a furiously hot oven. 221. Almond Cheesecakes. Boil a pint of new milk. Beat 3 eggs and stir into the milk while boiling. When it boils up, take it from the fire, put in half a wine glass of wine, separate the curd from the whey, and put to the curd 3 eggs, 6 ounces of powdered white sugar, previously beaten together. Add a teaspoonful of rose water, half a pound of sweet almonds that have been blanched and pounded fine, a quarter of a pound of melted butter. Mix the whole well together, then pour it into small pans that are lined with pastry. Ornament the top with Zante currants and almonds cut in thin slips. Bake them directly. End of chapter 12. Recording by Nick Number.